How was the retreat?
The retreat was really wonderful. Talking to Linda about it, it's oh, now we lost a couple people. How did that happen? We lost
Yeah, where did Susan go?
Susan, and I don't know who else we lost, but there, maybe she's coming back. Yeah. So
Okay, my sister told me she went to the retreat. I'm so glad.
yeah. She had a great time. I think she really enjoyed it.
I'm so glad. Hi, Susan. Welcome back.
So now
Did you go to the retreat, Susan?
Susan came for moments. She was there for a moment, and then you blinked, and then she wasn't, and then she came back, and then you blinked again, and then she wasn't there. But she was
having trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's frozen.
All right. Well, I hope, Susan, I hope you get to stay. And I hope you get to stay. Okay. All right. So it is Rosh Chodesh Av tonight, the beginning of the new month of Av. And Av is a tricky month. It's called Menachem Av as well, which means comfort to the month of Av. So the month of Av has two distinct different personas. It's got the persona in the beginning of the month, the first half of the month, which is really starting even on Rosh Chodesh, awareness of brokenness and destruction, particularly the destruction of the first temple and the second temple. We've already been focusing or somewhat focused on the fact that the walls of Jerusalem were breached already 2 weeks ago. On the 17th of Tammuz was the breaching of the walls of the old city. And we said that those breachings of the walls actually happened before the destruction of the first temple and the second temple. But we just go with the 17th of Tammuz, although I think the first temple, the walls were breached on the 9th, but we couldn't make so many different dates. But already since the 17th of Tammuz, we've been partially in a state of more awareness of what's been lost, what's been destroyed in terms of losing the temples, both the first temple and the second temple, but also not just putting our attention to what was lost, but trying to put our attention to how we can gain, how we can rebuild, how we can have all of that which the temple represents, what we can do to be in that headspace of rebuilding the third temple. So in terms of our retreat, somebody actually asked me, she said, Bracha, I don't understand why you're even having the retreat if it's going to fall out in the 3 weeks. And obviously there's the practical reason of why have the retreat if you can't, have the full amount of joy and pleasure and everything. But on the other hand, the retreat is part of the tikkun, it's part of the fixing of what gets destroyed with the destruction of the temple and all that represents, because you could say the temple is like the pinnacle of us as a Jewish nation in the world. We had a temple, people from all the different nations of the world came to bring their offerings to that temple. And that temple was a symbol of oneness and connection to oneness, and the people of Israel being a unified whole, and our connection with Hashem being intact, and our connection to the land of Israel being intact. And the temple was this great statement of the Jewish people functioning as they should. And we know that each of the temples were destroyed for different reasons. Externally, we can say different reasons. There's the external reasons and the internal reasons. So the external reasons for the destruction of the first temple, we could say that they were doing these bad averas. They were acts of licentiousness, immorality, relationships gone awry. Could say there was spilling of blood, murder, other such horrible violations of personal rights and respect for people's life. And the third thing is the worshiping of idols. So those are terrible things. You could say the Jewish people were guilty of these really bad sins, and so they couldn't sustain the great light of the temple amongst them. And so they lost the temple. The second time when we rebuilt the temple, we didn't have any of those sins being practiced. People were in a way much more obedient to the law. There wasn't the gilu arayas, the immorality. There wasn't the avodah zarah, the idol worship. There wasn't the spilling of blood. But we could say that there wasn't unity between the people. And because of that, the people couldn't sustain the temple. So when we're looking to rebuild the temple, we're looking to regain a state of unity and connectedness. And we're looking to regain that sense of connection to all parts of ourselves and connection to each other as a group, and connection to Hashem, connection to Torah. So in another way, you could say, and I don't think that this is not true, I think this is genuine, that in another way, the retreats and all that we try to accomplish with it is in a way part of the tikkun. We're trying to gather people together, bring a unity, bring a spiritual consciousness, bring about that kind of connectedness, the connection between people and all parts of ourselves to come into a oneness, and for us to come into a oneness with each other and come into a oneness with our connection to Hashem. So in a way, it takes place in the 3 weeks, but in my humble opinion, I think it's part of the fixing of what it is that we lost and what we're hoping to rebuild. So nevertheless, that was the 3 weeks, but all of that intensifies starting from today, because the last 9 days of the 3 weeks, even more intense as we're coming closer to this moment of loss and brokenness that's going to culminate on the 9th day of Av, which is the day that we say both temples were actually destroyed. So from now until then, we don't eat meat, we don't drink wine, we minimize our comfort. Some people, if they usually sleep with 2 pillows, they sleep with 1 pillow. You're not supposed to kind of be indulging in so much pleasure. Some people are minimizing in their washing, just wash for cleanliness, but not long, drawn out hot showers, more in the shower, out the shower, or just cold water. Some people don't wash their whole body all at once, no baths, just, take some cold water, do the primary spots, but not a time of great self-pampering to align with this time of destruction and loss. So that's till the 9th of Av. And last year, actually, maybe we'll do it again this year, we had some very profound learning on Tisha B'Av. We did some learning from the Mishnah Sota, which had a lot of readings and writings about the destruction of the temple and different things pertaining to that. So we'll have to send out a message about that if that's going to happen. But then the second part of Av is this incredible other energy of Av, which is on the 15th of Av, we have, in a way, what's called the Jewish the romantic day when there's matchmaking, and the Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, which is one of the most joyous days of Av. There's some beautiful rituals around that with unmarried women dancing, borrowing clothes from their friends. So everybody has a chance to, the rich girls to lend their clothes to the not so wealthy girls, and the poorer girls to wear their friends' outfits, and everyone dancing, and then chance for the woman to be seen and shidduchim to be made. So a day of great festivity on the 15th of Av, and then the rest of the month of Av is supposedly a month of much more revealed good. So looking at the Hayom Yom today, which is Rosh Chodesh, so it speaks about Mashiach, which is interesting. And it says that the unique quality of Mashiach is that he will be humble. And it continues, though he will be the ultimate in greatness, for he will teach Torah to the patriarchs and to Moshe Rabbeinu, alav hashalom, still he will be the ultimate in humility and self-nullification, for he will also teach the simple folk. So this is just a very, very short little teaching here, but there's so many things in this teaching. For example, this idea of the greatness of Mashiach is his humility. So at last year's retreat, we spoke about the quality of Malchus. Malchus can be translated as sovereignty, royalty. It's of the tree of life, it's the culminating quality. So you have the whole tree of life going from the top to the bottom, and all the different sphirot all come down to the final quality called Malchus, which is really all of the qualities that preceded. They all balanced, they've all integrated, they've all once taken all the teachings of all those different qualities, and they've kind of become distilled into this quality of Malchus, royalty or sovereignty, which means that if a person possesses Malchus, then that person has sovereignty over all of their different aspects. That person is like a leader, like a king. They have ownership of all their personality traits, and that's the quality of Mashiach, that Mashiach will have this quality of leadership, Malchus, to be a melech, a king. But the irony, in a way, the unique twist of this quality of Malchus from a Jewish point of view is that the king who has this quality is absolutely humble at the same time. So it's this empowered, integrated persona who's taken all these other qualities and taken the benefits of them, and then still is very humble. So that's the first thing. So that's Mashiach being humble. Then it says, though he will be the ultimate in greatness, for he will teach Torah to the patriarchs and to Moshe Rabbeinu. So you could just pass this sentence by and not think about it very much, but you could say, hang on a second. Mashiach is coming in the future, and the patriarchs and the matriarchs existed in our past. And Moshe Rabbeinu, well, how's he going to teach Torah to Moshe when Moshe lived in the Bible times and Mashiach is coming in the future? So I would like to ask you what you think of that question and the answer to that question.
One of the greatest lessons I ever learned was how Hashem sees the world. Is, if you remember the old film we used to have when we used to get our film developed, and it had negatives.
Yeah.
And you scratch out the negative, unroll it, and put it in front of you. That's how Hashem experiences the world. Like it's the whole story from beginning to end is in one shot. You know, you can see it one shot. So that's the imagery that came up for me. I don't know.
Okay, so it's an interesting imagery, which really does answer my question, because the concept of time is very linear in our thinking. We have a linear construct in time, but in reality, there is no linear construct of time. So I'm just going to plug my computer in, but there's no linear time. So even though if we think of time in two dimensions, we think of long ago. Long ago, there was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then there was Moses or Moshe. And then we're going to have, then there's us, and then there's going to be Mashiach. But in actual fact, that's not how it is. Time is just a construct. But in reality, in spiritual reality, everything is existing simultaneously. So let me plug in my computer and then I will carry on. So the idea that Mashiach will have connection and ability to teach Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and Moshe Rabbeinu is giving testimony to the idea that time is a much more holistic reality, and it's not like a long line that here's creation and we keep going along the line, and then there's now, and then we go along the line, and then there's tomorrow. It all exists in a nowness. So in the nowness, Mashiach is going to be able to teach the patriarchs and Moshe Rabbeinu. So that's a kind of interesting idea. And then continuing that he will be the ultimate in humility and self-nullification, because not only will he teach the greats like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and Moshe, but he's also going to teach the simple folk. So that's the Hayom Yom, which even in this small amount of lines is teaching us all about this idea of the empowered, humble leader that is something that we hold in very high esteem, and the ongoing nature of the nowness and how time is not a linear construct at all. And then that really cues in very beautifully with the Parsha of the persona of Moshe Rabbeinu being the ultimate teacher. So even though we say that Mashiach will teach Moshe, let's look at Moshe in the context and the construct of being a messianic persona in his own right. So Moshe is not the Mashiach. The Mashiach will teach Moshe, but Moshe was the Mashiach of his generation. And there's a lot to say about him as a teacher in this week's Parsha. So coming into this week's Parsha, the whole idea of the Parsha this week is that we're beginning a new book, and the book that we're beginning is the book of DEVARIM, which means words.
I mean,
Things. What?
It means Rosh Hashanah's coming. Elul's coming.
Means Rosh Hashanah's coming, and
the last book means we're getting towards the end and the beginning again.
yes, that is true. The world does have a habit of going in these cycles of like, okay, so we're having summer, then it's going to be the end of summer, and then it's going to be fall, and yeah. So all four books, the first four books of the Torah, Bereshit or Genesis, Shemot or Exodus, Vayikra or Leviticus, and Bamidbar or Numbers, all those books of the 4 books of the Chumash, which means Chamesh, 5 books, all those 4 books were divinely inspired, were written by God. And Moshe Rabbeinu just writes down what God tells him, even if he's writing down things about himself. He just writes down what God tells him to write. But the 5th book, DEVARIM, is actually very different, because this book is a book that Moshe is actually speaking, and he's having a month-long monologue, giving over his words of instruction, really, to the people the month before he passes away. And even though he's divinely inspired by God to speak, it's not God speaking through Moshe, it's Moshe speaking, but with Ruach HaKodesh, which is different, right? It's different. The first 4 books, you could say, are written by God, and Moshe is the instrument that God uses to channel his message through Moshe into the world. The 5th book, DEVARIM, is Moshe speaking his message of farewell to his constituents, but everything that's coming through him is being divinely inspired. So do you get it? It's a little different. So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs talks about this parsha, and he talks about the idea of Moshe as a leader, and the incredible aspect that Moshe, in a way, transforms, that he's not a redeemer, he's not a miracle maker, I wrote it all down here, that he's, what did I write? Where did I write all these words? Okay. Well, he's not bringing them out of Egypt. He's not doing miracles. He's not doing any of those things. What he's doing in this parsha is he's actually teaching them. He's teaching them. He's imparting a message and a vision to the Jewish people about who they are and what they are. Because really what happens in Parshas DEVARIM, and actually most of the Sefer of DEVARIM, is that everything that we're reading, we read about before. There's nothing new. Moshe is saying, remember when this happened, and then you did this, and then I did that, and then this happened, and that happened, and then we did this, and you did that, and God did this. And you're like, hang on, we know all this. We read about it, all of this, when it came around in Shemot, or in Vayikra, or in Bamidbar. Why do we have to have it all over again? So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs talks about this incredible thing that Moshe has already handed over his leadership, really, to Yeshua. He knows he's not going to be bringing the Jews into Israel. He knows that. He knows that that task has already been given over to Yeshua. So now what is he doing? He's just, and there's a few laws that he's giving them that he didn't give them before, a few things pertaining to them entering the land that he's going to give them. But he really says this is really a very interesting thing, that this is what Jewish people do very well. They create educators. They create inspirational teachers. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing. He's giving the Jewish people kind of like the why of who they are. So he says, who are they? this band of people that Moshe schlepped out of Egypt and kind of dragged, I don't know if you really dragged, but across the desert. And who are they? So he said, they are, and this is really what he's telling them in this final address. They are Hashem's people, the nation on whom Hashem has set his love, the people he rescued from slavery and gave in the form of commandments the constitution of liberty. Like he's really pointing out to them their incredible history, that they were taken by Hashem and they were given this bunch of laws, and that they're small, but they're unique. They are the people who in themselves testify to something beyond themselves. They are the people whose fate will defy the normal laws of history. Other nations, says Moshe, will recognize the miraculous nature of the Jewish story. And in fact, that's true, right? We have famous quotes of Mark Twain and various different people knowing that there was something special and different about the Jewish people. So that's what Moshe is doing. So here it says, he's not the liberator, he's not the miracle worker, not the redeemer, but he becomes Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, our person who's shaping the way we look at the world. And Rabbi Sachs says he was the first example in history of a leadership type in which the Jews have excelled, the leader as teacher. And that's really an interesting idea, that in other nations they had kings and they had powerful, warriors and people who conquered, many countries across the globe. But the Jewish persona is this leader who's teacher. And he even actually talks about the fact that the Jewish people also have had kings, but our relationship to the king, there's a lot of limits on the king. The king can't have too much money. He can't have too many wives. He's not supposed to have too many horses, all of which King Shlomo actually broke a lot of those rules. And it wasn't so good that he had too many wives and too much money and too many horses. But generally a king is considered, there's a lot of restrictions on a king. And the king is only really given to the people almost as an acquiescence to the people, that they were given permission to have a king, but they were never obligated to have a king. But the teacher in the role of the Jewish nation, the teacher is like held up to great esteem. Says in the Talmud, let the fear of your teacher be like the fear of Shemayim. And it talks about respect and reverence for your teacher should be even greater, according to the Rambam, than your parents, because your parents bring you into this world, but your teacher is going to give you access to the world to come. So that's pretty intense. But the idea of when we think about Moshe, we think about him as our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, that he's doing this act of teaching, and this is it. So, so he said also, Jonathan Sachs himself says there's a difference between giving people what they want and teaching them what to want. So that, I think that's very good. Teachers are the builders of the future. The leader as teacher using influence rather than power, spiritual and intellectual authority rather than coercive force, was one of the greatest contributions Judaism has ever made to the moral horizons of humankind. And so this is what Rabbi Sachs is saying, that for the last month of Moshe's life, he's summoning the next generation and teaching it the laws and lessons that would survive and inspire forevermore, because Moshe knows he's not going to be with them, and he's not going to cross over the Jordan and go with them into Israel. And so he's, really trying to, give them all that he's got going into the next part. So that's about Moshe and about this Parsha. And just a little bit more about Av before we conclude. And this is from Rabbi Pinson. And Rabbi Pinson actually, Dov Ber Pinson is right here in Rockland County. He's in Maua. He has a teaching center and he's a really profound person.
Tell us more.
Well, as I'm telling you that, I'm thinking that we should try to find out more about the things that he's doing, because he's written a lot of books. I have a book here, The Month of Tammuz and Av. He has quite a few books on the different months of the year. He's written tremendous amount of books, and he was in Brooklyn, and then he was only sometimes in Rockland County. And then I don't actually know how much he's in Rockland County now and if he's given up Brooklyn, but I know he's established a community in Maua with the
Jersey. How do you spell his name?
Dov Ber Pinson, Pinson. And he has a shul and a neighborhood, and I don't know how widely publicized his things are, but he's an interesting person. I think we should all find out more about when he's teaching and what he's doing. So I just want to share a couple things that he spoke about in terms of this brokenness, because we can think about the brokenness of the temple, and we can feel bad about what it represented, and we can try and rebuild unity amongst us and all of that. But really, one of the ideas of relating to this time is to connect to the brokenness, I guess, within ourselves, right? And to connect to the idea of brokenness altogether. Where does it come from? Where in creation is there this aspect of broken? Where does it start? So I just want to share with you a little bit of something. I didn't read it fully to process it fully, but I'll give you a little bit of what I've got so far. So he says, previously in the book, he was talking about the previous month, the month of Tammuz. And he said the month of Tammuz is connected with the quality of jealousy, but the month of Av, which is the month we're in now, is connected to this idea of insatiable desire, like wanting what you want. Now, wanting is a very good thing if you want the right things, but if you want the wrong things, then it's something that can lead you very far off the good path. So taiva is a very high thing, but it can be very challenging. So he's saying that Av is connected to taiva, and he even translates it as insatiable desire. So for this reason, Tammuz and Av are joined, because there's this connection of destruction and mourning, jealousy and desire go together. From jealousy, if you're jealous of what someone else wants, then starts off with jealousy, and then you want what they have. So jealousy can lead into wanting. It says the hot weather can stimulate desire and lust. In Av, the summer heat is full force, and we want to take this opportunity to direct our desires towards healthy ends. When necessary, we may even need to sublimate, elevate, or transform our desires. So, it's much harder to work. Let's say you have an adolescent kid. If they're depressed and they have no desire for anything at all, I would imagine that that's harder for a person to work with than a kid who wants the wrong things, but they're alive. And then if you can turn them to wanting the right things, at least they've got passion and liveliness to them, but you need to rechannel. But if they've, totally out of everything, to get them awake is even hard in itself. So in the month of Av, we offered a special koach, a special energy, a strength to refine and elevate our desire at the root, to create a tikkun for our misplaced energy and attention. So why does this destruction come in the first place? This, which eventually led to the breaking of the temples, but it's something that maybe we can identify within ourselves, within a spiritual root that's more personal. So the insatiable desire of Av, the 5th month, spring, summer, is the counterpoint to the month of satisfaction of Shvat. Remember, Tu B'Shvat, the fruits just like beginning to burst forth, and the sap moving in the limbs of the tree. That's all about a kind of satisfaction. The eventual trajectory of uncontrolled desire is a life of deep dissatisfaction, strife, and restlessness. If we can navigate this month with knowledge and intentionality, we can achieve a new level of deep listening. So now there's a quality of this month that's connected to listening. I think every month has its healing element. And the healing element of this month is listening. Tammuz was seeing correctly. When the spies saw the land and their eyes didn't look with a good eye, that was what led them to downfall. And the healing of this month is listening well. Like, how many issues with people where there's discord comes from not listening well to the other person. So by going through this month with knowledge and intentionality, we're going to try to get to deep listening. And that listening will give us the ability to elevate our desire and connect our desires to the source. Like sometimes it's even listening to your own desire. Let's say somebody hurts your feelings, or you have a big disappointment, or something really upsets you. How many times do you get the feeling of, I want to eat ice cream or pizza or pasta? I just want to eat something, right? You want to eat something, but if you ask yourself, what do I really want? Right? Do you want the pizza? Do you want the pasta? Or do you want to feel connected to something loving? Maybe you really need a hug or a conversation with someone you're close to. But so if you try to listen to what you really need and not give in to the taiva. So the listening can be listening to someone else, can also be listening to yourself. So during the first part of Av, we mourn and commemorate destruction, separation, and exile, both on a collective and a personal level. We sensitize ourselves to the apparent distance and absence of the divine. So really what we're looking for in any pain or any suffering is that we feel disconnected from Hashem, from our soul. That's really the disconnect that we really feel. We acknowledge our separation from our homeland and our spiritual imperfection. In this awareness of something missing, the desire for love and connection with others is augmented. So it's actually interesting that later we have this whole Jewish, almost, I don't want to say Valentine's Day, because I don't want to, Saint Valentine, I don't believe was a great friend of the Jews, but this romantic coming together, finding soulmates, that's the flip side of all the pain of separation and feeling something missing. So he just connects it to the days of creation, that in the Torah's description, there's the first day of creation, which I believe, what was created in the first day? I think dark and light, right? That's the first day of creation. Let's just see. days of creation. I think in the first day, in the beginning, light, right? The first day was light. Now, what happened on the second day? Day 2. The word tov doesn't come up on day 2. And on every other day, there is the word tov. Why? Because on day 2 was the separation of the upper waters and the lower waters. That was separating. And the land from the water, that there was separating land from water and upper waters from lower waters. So day 2 represents the paradigm of separation and duality. And it actually says in the Medrash, it says on day 2, Gehenna was created. Gehenna is, sometimes people translate that as hell. What is that? It's a state of incompleteness, something missing, an absence of Hashem's light. And it says all friction, all argument, all tension comes from this separating of the upper waters and the lower waters. On the other hand, in the description of day 3, the word tov comes twice, in a way, once for day 2 and once for day 3. So separation can be good when it creates a deeper desire to reunite. On day 2, when the lower waters were separated from the upper waters, the lower waters felt this pan of separation and kind of cried out. We also want to be in the presence of a king, of the king. And it says, because of this yearning of the lower waters wanting to merge with the upper waters, the waters merited to be poured onto the altar during the festival of Sukkot. And that's when we have Simchas Beishoeva, the waters get poured on the Mizbeach. The idea of absence makes the heart grow fonder. The lower waters crying and desiring to be higher and closer to the king is the good that came about through the separation. So I'm not going to go much further. I'm just going to end this part and just say that the idea of what's missing and the destruction in the first half of the month, accompanied by the fasting and the practices of collective and individual mourning, all showing us what we're missing and yearning, and in a way that creates the stimulation to yearn for the rejoining and the binding and the coming together, which in day 3, they say was very, very good. So the Tov Ma'od. So that's just a little bit of a little deeper spin on taking these ideas and making them personal in terms of what do we feel we lacking, what are we yearning for, what is the source of our lack, and how can we address that to find wholeness within ourselves and try to be that wholeness. And ultimately, all sense of lack comes from a sense of being separated from Hashem and all his goodness, and in a way, heading to the temple and building the temple for ourselves in our consciousness and our awareness is really plugging into that idea that God and goodness of God and the abundance of God and the all-encompassingness of God and goodness and his light and his Shefa is always available to us if we plug into it. But when we disengage from it, that's when we feel the separation and the lacking and the wanting and the pain and the suffering, and that's what gives birth to all the destruction. And so we want to plug into the wholeness within ourselves and to try and see that Hashem is there for us, and there is a wholeness in our experience if we can plug into it.
That really is like a nice segue into the retreat, which was people getting off the the way I can get off the train, the roller coaster, to stop, to go within and reflect where you're at, what you want, where be inspired by spirituality. It's a perfect timing. And
it is a perfect timing. I mean, there's things you can't do. There's certain things you can't do. You can't, play your guitar around the campfire and have your, musical moment in that way. But it is a time for fixing and contemplating and going in and becoming more self-aware of not only what it is that you want, but what is the source of your wanting. What is the source of your pain, of your separation? Where, I got this image and I can't really say I got it myself. I don't know if I got it myself. I'm not sure if I got it myself or I got it from my friend. But maybe in conversation with her, she kept talking about plugging in. And this idea, of like a cell phone. If your cell phone isn't plugged in, it will run dry. And when it runs dry, it will stop working, simply. But if you plug it in, the battery will charge. And in a way, when we're not plugged in, with the cell phone, it's kind of simple. If it has battery juice, it works. If it doesn't have juice, it doesn't work. But if it's plugged in, it works, and all the apps work and everything works and it's fully functional. When it's not plugged in, at a certain point, it's good for nothing, right? If it runs out of its juice, if it's not charged. So we have to plug in to the fact that Hashem, source, goodness, everything that Hashem is, if we plug into that, then we resource, then we, like a cell phone, and all of our parts are working. If we don't plug into that, then we have that separation, alienation, sense of separateness from God, from other people. Then we feel sorry for ourselves. Then we feel all our lacks and our wants. And if we keep feeling our lacks, then we could start getting aggressive, start being jealous, start being catty, start being, mean. It's all coming from a feeling that we're not plugged in, we're not resourced, we're not connected. And that's really the root of the temple, the destruction. It's all that we pulled the plug out. We weren't plugged in. The more unplugged we got, the more things started to, fall apart. There's no unity in the people. They're doing all these bad sins. There's fighting. We learned at the last year on Tisha B'Av, it was really intense. The Jewish people in the siege had enough food because of the wealthy families. They could have survived a siege for many, many, many years. I can't remember the actual year. We learned it like 21 years or something, they had enough food. But the Jewish people who didn't believe in some political, they felt that, I just momentarily forgot, there was differences of opinion, and Jewish people burnt the food that they had in store. So the Romans put them under siege, but they had enough money, food to survive the siege. But then Jewish people burnt the food of the Jews. So then we starved, and then we had terrible catastrophe. But, there were a lot of things there that were self-inflicted, things that terrible things that we did because we didn't have unity and listening and caring for each other, and political difference of opinion. And why did those zealots burn the food? Because I've forgotten why they burnt the food, but they didn't want maybe the Jews to surrender to, I don't know what happened.
You're too woke.
I can't remember.
They're probably woke progressives.
Yeah, there was something about their philosophy that was really toxic, and so they burnt the food.
Now.
Yeah, so we have that as well. So listening and getting to, the root of our needs, and realizing that, abundance is around, peace is available, but there's places we have to fix it within, and then you know, hopefully we start to ripple outwards. And it's not, you know, it's not always easy to understand what it is within. Maybe it's your own shadow. It's not only, you know, maybe it's, we have to do the embracing and the unifying and the accepting from deep, deep, deep inside, and then it starts to ripple, ripple, ripple. Something like that.
Okay.
So there it is.
Here it is.
Rachel, you mentioned the word juice twice, and it makes me ignited to just share with everyone. There's this incredible book that talks about your juice called
Juice?
"Oh Life Lived"
Juice.
by a
Oh,
Yeah.
what?
2-year-old woman wrote it. And she just wrote it. She's 102. A Life Well Lived. And she talks about your juice. And
What's it called again?
Oh, here's my juice. See, I'm
life
drinking.
well
I'm
lived.
I'm drinking juice.
Here's your juice. So since you said juice twice, I thought I would just share how wonderful the book is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. We
have
have
to
the idea of being plugged in, you know, there's juice there too, right? People even say that. I don't have any juice left in my battery.
Right.
Yeah, anyway,
So
I
that
bless everybody
idea,
with a peaceful, a mindful, a sensitive and enlightening 9 days, and then an easy fast. And please God, we should, you know, we should find out what it is that we need to fix so that we can fix it already. That would be good.
Amen. And I hope you do something at your house. I'd very much like to come, but only if it's good for you. You want to reflect, read it all?
Do I want to what?
Reflect on this particular retreat?
Oh, sure. I can reflect. I'll put the